Hello and welcome back to the Opposites Abroad podcast, a podcast about all things travel. Charlie Bosco here, joined as ever by my good friend TT down in Denver, and today we are talking all things Spain. Last week it was North Korea, this week Spain. A slight change of gear, but hopefully we've got some information, inspiration, and one or two stories right on the edge of acceptable. We shall see. TT, habla español?
Paquito.
If that means a little bit, then you definitely speak more than me. I had to look up habla español before we got started.
I can do enough Spanish to kind of horrible travel Spanish, I would say.
That's horrible travel Spanish more than me. My French is okay, German's okay, Italian and Spanish, just no start whatsoever, nothing. Although I noticed in Italian, I was in Italy about a month ago, Italian is kind of English with a few extra vowels on the end. So when I read a sign in Italian, I often go, oh yeah, I know what that means. I can't say it. I don't know what any of the individual words are on their own, but when you put it together, I can kind of read it. It's like English with extra vowels.
Yeah, I think Italian has some similarities to Spanish too. I think Italian's a beautiful language.
I think it's gorgeous. I just wish I could speak it, but apparently they are very similar. A lot of the vowels are just different, but the words and the structure is pretty similar. So I'm told. People who speak both now are probably yelling at their podcast device.
Probably.
So Spain, few facts. Just under 50 million people. It's 500,000 square kilometers, 25% bigger than California, but 25% smaller than Texas. Don't mess with Texas. And nothing like as big as Alaska. So that's your points of reference for our American audience. Made up of 17 regions, and Madrid and Barcelona are the two most famous cities, and Madrid is the capital. So speaking of the regions, two of those regions, the Basque, which is partly in France, and Catalonia have strong support for independence, and those situations are complex and ongoing. We probably won't talk about them too much. At some stage we'll get someone on who can help explain them to us. I got talking to a guy once who was from Catalonia, and there's a huge amount to that situation. So we probably won't tackle that today. We're going to talk about what it's like to visit Spain, what you can expect, where you should go, and give a bit of a background on what is a very interesting and historic European country. So first up, sport is huge in Spain. And we have this game, TT, called soccer. And you use your feet. So we call it football. I know this, try and wrap your head around this concept.
I'm trying.
And it's huge in Spain. You just got back from Spain. You were in Madrid, hey?
I was, yes. I was there for a week just a few weeks ago. And
did you catch any soccer?
But I saw some Real Madrid shirts.
Did you go past the stadium?
No, I did not.
It is enormous.
I bet. I bet.
Yeah, so soccer, football, if we're being logical and not very American, is huge. Three big teams, really: Atletico Madrid, Real Madrid, and Barcelona. Food in Spain, tapas, and then I thought, what else? Tell me what else you ate in Spain, what else you'd recommend eating in Spain.
Well, and I think every region's different, but in Madrid, tapas, and then they have that ham everywhere, that kind of dried ham, and there's a lot of different varieties of it. First night I went, I got a big variety plate, and then I ate so much ham the next morning at breakfast, it kind of made me sick looking at it, because it was just, I love it, but it's so much salt and grease, and it's really, really a lot.
Yeah, when you're down in that fourth pint of water before 10 a.m., you know you overdid the breakfast ham a bit.
Yes, I ate in that time that I was there for that week, I had so much ham and I drank so much cava, which is kind of their version of champagne. But you can get a bottle of wine or cava for just unbelievably cheap compared to most places. So you tend to always order it at meals.
And the wine, Spanish wine, is also pretty good, hey?
It is good. I'm not a huge wine connoisseur. It all tastes kind of like wine to me, but yeah, it is good. You just have to remember that, and we can talk about it now or we can talk about it later, but the hours of meals are different than pretty much anywhere else I've been to. You know, in the U.S., people tend to eat dinner about 6-ish, in the you come home from work and then you have dinner and then you watch a movie or go do something. In Madrid, most of the restaurants don't reopen from lunch until about 8:30 at night, and a lot of people don't eat till midnight-ish. It's so different. And for me, 8:30 is just really, really late to eat dinner. And you get somewhere at 8:30 and they're not really even firing the kitchen up yet, and there's hardly anybody there. It's very, very different.
Yeah, well, that leads us nicely onto the topic of culture. And Spanish culture is notoriously relaxed. It's not a country where it feels like anyone's in a particular rush. I mean, actually, maybe it does in Madrid, where it's the financial and political capital of the country, but the general feel in Spain is that people have got a bit of time on their hands. One of the few Spanish words I know, mañana, tomorrow.
Yes.
People have quite a relaxed attitude to life, but that late eating thing is one of the most notable cultural elements, and it's true of partying as well. A friend of mine lived in Madrid for a few years, and I said to her, I was in Madrid once, and I didn't really know what all the nightlife was about. We gave up about midnight. And she goes, well, that's because it hasn't started. And she said when she lived there, again, like you wouldn't go out till midnight. You'd arrive at your first bar at midnight, and then the night would finish well into the next day. And it's just a different way of doing things. Hey, everything feels relaxed. They take their time, and it's late.
Yeah, I didn't feel like it was the hustle and bustle of a big city the way that you think of New York or London or Paris. I did feel like it was relaxed and a lot cleaner than I expected. It was different than I expected for a big European capital.
Expand on that. Tell me what you mean.
Well, most people, at least in the United States, they go to Barcelona for vacation. You rarely hear people that go to Madrid, or if they do Madrid, they do for a day or two while they're on their way to Barcelona. So I was really excited to go to Madrid because I like going to places where I'm not going to run into a bunch of tourists and Americans. And there were some tourists there, but not a ton. And it was a prettier city than I expected. There was more to do. There's some amazing museums. The food was great. It was reasonably priced. The people were nice. It was walkable. I thought it was a lot better than I expected, to be honest.
What were you expecting?
I was kind of just expecting a big industrial, kind of boring city, because people kind of always make it sound like Barcelona is a beautiful city and Madrid's just the capital, kind of like it's just kind of there because it has to be there. But I thought it was really, really nice.
So what would you recommend to the first time visitor in Madrid?
I think you've got to hit a couple of the big museums. There's famous Picassos. I thought the archaeology museum was really, really good. But I tend to really like archaeology museums. I like natural history museums. And one of the reasons I like those museums is they're usually not full of tourists. Tourists tend to go to art museums because it's more like Instagrammable, I guess, and you can take pictures of a Picasso and show you saw it. You don't really see a lot of people taking pictures of dinosaur bones and stuff on Instagram. But the archaeology museum there is really, really good because it focuses on the history of Spain. So it goes back through tons of stuff from when the Romans were in Spain to when it was ruled by Muslims. It was just a fascinating museum. So that was one of my favorite things. The shopping is really good there. Spain is probably the cheapest for luxury shopping in Europe and maybe in the world because the VAT tax is so huge that you get back and the prices are already low. But I noticed going to some luxury stores that some of the stuff was about 30% cheaper than you could get in the United States by the time it was all said and done. So that's really fun too.
That's awesome. As someone that shops in thrift stores, I already get pretty good prices.
That's true. There's great day trips from there too. I did not do any day trips, but if you look at some of the options, there's absolutely some beautiful medieval cities and Roman aqueducts and things within just a few hours bus ride or train ride.
Yeah, and it's had an interesting history because after the Romans, as you alluded to, there were a series of Islamic dynasties, and then really I think it was in the 1490s, the Spanish Empire really began, and obviously they conquered it. Like Britain, they conquered a huge amount of the world, and their influence is felt across a remarkable amount of the globe, given the size of Spain.
Yes, but unlike Britain, they're still not a piece of. They don't own a piece of Spain like Britain does.
Is this the English county of Gibraltar?
Yes, which I have been to too.
What's Gibraltar like?
Gibraltar is super super interesting. You go from Malaga, and you can do a day trip. I would say if you're in the southern part of Spain, it's a must see to go to Gibraltar. It's this little chunk of England at the bottom of Spain that's still owned by the British, and there's British flags everywhere. There's pubs. It looks like they just pulled up a piece of England and stuck it at the bottom of Spain. The citizens there are British with British accents, and it's just a very, very strange place. It's the only part in Europe that has wild monkeys. So there's monkeys in Gibraltar that run around on some of the streets, and they originally, of course, came from Africa, but they've been there for, I don't know, thousands of years probably. So that's really neat, seeing wild monkeys in Europe, because this is not something you think about. But there's a lot of politics when it comes to Gibraltar, that Spain really wants that land, but England doesn't want to give it up because of the strategic importance of it, because it goes right into the kind of the neck of the Mediterranean, and Britain wants that sea power still. So it's just a super interesting place.
Britain with sun. Now I could live there.
But yeah, Britain with sun. Yeah, you go to Bermuda too, I guess, if you want Britain with sun. But
yeah, true.
But I think those last vestiges of the British Empire are really interesting.
Yeah. And we just mentioned it then. One thing that's very notable about Spain for anyone thinking of visiting is the weather. The weather is very, very good. In the north of the country, they get something resembling a winter. The Pyrenees Mountains, which straddle the French and Spanish border, have many ski resorts. It can get pretty cold in Barcelona and Madrid. Not Canadian cold, but it can get pretty chilly. They get a proper winter. In the south, Seville, Malaga, Cadiz, anywhere on the south coast, a lot of the Costa del Sol, so Alicante, Benidorm, they get a pretty mild winter. It's for the Celsius users out there, it won't dip into single figures too often. So Spain has a very good climate. If you go to Spain, you get bad weather, you can count yourself pretty unlucky. So which other bits have you explored? You go first. You've been to Malaga, right?
I've been to Malaga, and then I've been to Madrid on 2 separate trips. I really want to go to Barcelona, and when I go to Barcelona, I want to go up and do a day trip up to Andorra, that little country between France and Spain. But those are the 2 trips I've done so far, and I really love both of them. And it does help because I can do a little bit of horrible Spanish. I think just from there's a big Hispanic population from Mexico and Colorado, so I practice Spanish, and I can ask for things and go and find the bathroom and order food and get directions and stuff, and that really helps too.
And that is a top tip when you're traveling anywhere really, but particularly in Europe. People really seem to appreciate if you can at least ask for a table and order a drink in their language.
Yes, especially a bigger place like that's a more common language, like in Spain.
Yeah, if you go to Finland, they probably can live with it, but
yeah, exactly. So when I went to Malaga, I did a really short trip, and I should have gone for longer, and I tried to jam too much stuff in, but I did 2 day trips when I was there. I did one to Gibraltar and one into Morocco. And the Gibraltar one I talked about, it was awesome. The Morocco one was horrible. Not
what? Why do you get the boat? Do you get the boat from Malaga or Gibraltar?
From Malaga, and it was like a 14 or 16 hour day, and only spent really a couple hours in Morocco, in Tangiers.
Oh, it's Tangier you get the boat to, hey?
Yes, and it's like you take this super long bus to get to the border, and then you, or not really the border, the edge of Spain, and then you sit in immigration forever, and then take the boat or the ferry, and then you get there, and then you go through an unbelievably horribly chaotic experience when you get there, going through their immigration, and then you get out, and then the tour was just awful. I actually, for like the only time I've ever done this, when I got back, I emailed the tour place and complained, and they gave me half my money back.
Really? What the tour in Tangiers was bad?
It was terrible. So, I want to see history, and I want to walk around. I want to have food. I want to see a museum. I want to get a little bit of the culture where I am.
You want to get your feet on the ground.
Yes, and the problem,
experience the place.
And I want to experience the place and felt like I went there. The problem with some tours is they become just an excuse for them to take you places to try to get more money out of you. So you're on that tour, and they're like, "Oh, we're going to go to this rug museum," and then they take you to a rug store. And then, "Oh, we're going to take you to a perfume museum, and it's a perfume store." Or we're going to go learn about spices, and it's a spice store. And every single thing was just trying to like grift money out of you. And then they said, "Oh, we're going to go see camels," and it's sort of like this sad, horribly starved-looking camel in a dirt parking lot that you take pictures with. And you're there for 5 minutes, and then you're off to the next thing. And
that just sounds like the antithesis of why anyone would travel.
Yeah, and it was just, and I was stupid because I was in Spain and I saw, oh, I can go there for a day, and I've never been to Morocco. Well, of course I'm going to do that because I love going to new countries and seeing new places. But it's just a huge waste of a day. And I left super early in the morning. I think I got back at like midnight. And I got back and I was starving, and I had to go to the bathroom because I'd been on the bus forever. And it was just, I would have been way better just spending that day in Spain. But the story of my life, sometimes I try to do too much, and that was one of them. Gibraltar day trip is totally worth it. But if you're there, I would just do Morocco for a few days, not try to do one of those day trips, or go back and do a Morocco trip on your own.
Yeah, I'd actually like to do an episode on Morocco. I've spent a lot of time in Morocco. I think it's a great country. I think it's a great introduction to not traveling in the developed world, because it kind of straddles that gap between really out there places or really different places like, say, India, Nepal, those kinds of places, and Western Europe. It's somewhere in the middle. So I would really we'll do an episode on Morocco sooner or later. But that's interesting that you had such a bad experience. I've never been to Tangiers, but it's a great country with a lot to like. So maybe we'll go back together one time and we'll do it properly.
That'd be fun. And I don't think it was Tangiers' fault. I think it was the tour company's fault.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So of the places I've been to in Spain, I actually spent, back in the happy days, we don't try and talk politics on this podcast, but I'm happy to admit that it was better when Britain was in the EU. So back in the happy days, pre-Brexit, when I could travel unrestricted to 27 countries. I mean, who'd want that? Who'd want that when you could have sovereignty? No one's quite figured. No one on the Brexit side has yet told me what sovereignty is, but apparently it's incredibly important, and we now have it, and we didn't used to, so that's a big relief. So back in the day, I worked for a summer in the Alps, and then I had some money saved up, and I went off to Spain, and I was there nearly 3 months, which makes my lack of Spanish really just inexcusable. I think at the time this was 2007. Maybe I could order a few drinks, but much to my embarrassment, I was traveling with an English person. And
yeah.
No excuse. I just didn't learn the language. I just hold my hands up.
I can't really judge you since you speak like 3 languages, and I really speak 1 and like a tenth of a language. I feel like
I speak 1 and a tenth of 2.
I think your German and French are better than my Spanish.
You know what? I'll take that. Yeah, but not by much. But we drove down. I don't remember if we drove straight from the Alps or if we went back to the UK. But anyway, we crossed the border, drove into Barcelona. Barcelona was great. I like Barcelona, but it's touristy. And quite a few places in Europe, there have recently been these anti-tourist protests.
Oh, yes, yes.
And Barcelona is really one of those places.
In Madrid as well. There was a big protest the first night I got to Madrid, and I couldn't figure out exactly what they were protesting. But I have a rule when I travel that if I see a group of young men marching or carrying signs or chanting, that I go the opposite direction. I don't go over to see what they're doing. Because if you stand out sometimes as a tourist and they're protesting tourists, you just never know, and they're going to be like, let's grab that guy. So I kind of went the other direction, but they've had a lot of issues with anti-tourism because it's driving up the cost of housing. I kind of have mixed feelings on it because it also brings a ton of money into their economy, and I think it's a little short-sighted sometimes not to understand the benefits of tourists. Now, I get it if it's an area where all it is hostels and you've got a bunch of teenagers not really bringing money into the economy, but you've got nicer hotels and nicer restaurants. Foreigners can bring in a ton of money to a country and really help the economy.
Yeah, it's a really complex situation, but I think you've got to be careful what you wish for, because I think a lot of people don't work directly in tourism, and therefore they think they don't want the tourists. But actually, tourists mean more revenue for the government, which might mean better public services, or it might mean that you pay lower taxes. So there are all these perhaps hidden benefits to the tourists. And I'm not saying they don't have a point, and maybe there should be some restriction, but it's probably a little bit more complex than just saying the tourists are causing all these problems.
Well, it props up museums. I was really impressed in Madrid. There was beautiful Christmas markets, and there was beautiful Christmas decorations up everywhere that were put up obviously by the government because they were strung across streets and things like that. And I just wonder, without those tourism dollars, if the government would have the money to really beautify the city. And
it might not have the incentive to beautify it. I mean, interestingly enough, this is a big tangent, but to go on a quick tangent, here in British Columbia, where I live, there's recently been a law passed that you can't short-term let anything that you don't live in. So if you have a house that has a suite in it, you can Airbnb that. But if you have a second house, you can't Airbnb it. So you can only short-term let a property that is your primary residence. Because there's a housing crisis across a lot of Canada, and particularly in BC, and each municipality can choose whether it participates in that scheme or not, but most have done. So Airbnb in BC has just died, and the value of properties in many depends on the ski resort, but many ski towns or smaller towns have just plummeted because a lot of people had a ski chalet and they used it 6 weeks of the year, and then the other 46 weeks of the year they could let it out and it would pay the mortgage, which, hey, that was great. But they've actually outlawed that in BC to try and solve the housing crisis. So whether that happens in places like Madrid and Barcelona is yet to be seen, but there's definitely a bit of pushback from the locals against tourists. And it's complex.
So one of these things, when you go places, especially places that have anti-tourism sentiments like Madrid or Barcelona, I really try to blend in generally when I travel, and I tend to dress fairly European, and I'm of European descent, so it's easier. So I know people can't always blend in. Like, I'm going to Hong Kong is my next big trip. It's pretty hard for me to blend in Hong Kong. But in Spain, I certainly can. So as an American, what I recommend is just try to dress nicer, and that'll be a common theme you'll hear me talk about on many of these shows, because I think it shows respect for other places and just gets you better service. But if you're dressed like an American slob in Madrid and you're wandering around the streets at night and there's a group of young men chanting anti-tourist stuff, you're really kind of making yourself a target. You're wearing darker clothes and you're dressed nicely, you can just keep your mouth shut and they don't know where you're from, and you just kind of walk by and they think you're one of them. It really helps. But again, I understand that it depends on people's nationality and stuff, whether you can pull that off. But a place like Spain, I would really not try to stand out as an American. I wouldn't have my baseball hat on backwards and a American University sweatshirt and white Nike sneakers and be walking around, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually struggle to fit in Spain because my skin is not white, it's translucent. I'm actually see-through. if the sun's behind me.
Just say you're from Gibraltar.
Yeah.
Well, they might not like that either.
No, they might not like that. I mean, I would fit in great in, say, Stockholm, where they don't get a lot of sun, or Latvia, places where it's not sunny. I fit in great because I look like I've never seen the sun. So, Spain is a tricky sell for me, but I agree. And one thing culturally that you notice, I think, in Italy and Spain is that life is quite informal in how people behave. So mañana, huge emphasis on family. People take their time over meals. Meals can be basically one meal that lasts all day. People often, as you said, don't eat till midnight. But generally, people look pretty smart. They're quite tidy, well-dressed people on the whole.
They do, and I find Europe to be that. And then one of the things I really like about Europe that you don't see a lot in the United States, other than maybe in New York or Chicago or certain parts, you certainly don't see it in Denver. But I like seeing fashion, and I like seeing people dress nicely that look like they put some effort into what they're wearing. And you don't go to a fancy steakhouse. You go to a fancy steakhouse in the United States, and you see people just dress so horribly with baseball hats and T-shirts, and you don't see that in Europe. So I think it is a little insulting if you go to a really nice restaurant in Spain or France and you don't look like you put any effort into your appearance.
Yeah, so we were originally talking about Barcelona. I love the tangents. We've got to keep the tangents going, but we were talking Barcelona, and that is true in Barcelona. People are generally pretty neat and presentable. People definitely aren't walking around in suits, but people have a sort of style that maybe you don't see that often in North America or in England, honestly. People look quite suave.
They do.
The word I would use. The other thing in Barcelona is the architecture is superb. The Gaudi influence, so many interesting looking buildings, a lot of famous sites. The other thing Barcelona has is a humongous beach. It stretches for miles. It's got a walkway all along it. So it's a thumbs up for Barcelona. The only thing I would say is it does feel quite touristy. So maybe the anti-tourist protesters have a point there, because I do feel like a lot of it is geared towards the tourist. But as we've said in previous episodes, so often the way to solve that is just walk a few blocks. If you're on one of the big strips through the middle of Barcelona, just turn left or right and walk a mile, and the chances are you will have a much more genuine experience. But the more famous parts of Barcelona do feel like they've kind of been monopolized by the tourists. And the other final thing I'll say about Barcelona is it's got a really good public transit system. It's just very easy to get around. And you don't need to speak Spanish. You just need to recognize which word is which.
I tend to like walking a lot. And if I can walk, even if the public transportation is great, I tend to do that because I just feel like you see so many of the sights and smells and feelings of a city. But you can't always do that. I mean, you and I walked across Taipei, which is probably the longest I've ever walked in a single day, which we'll have to talk about in a Taipei episode.
For sure. I think we did 18k, which is 11 miles in the old school, but it was a lot. Yeah, but it was great. One of my favorite days ever.
Yeah, it took an entire day, but it was super fun. And when I was in Madrid, I averaged about 5 to 6 miles a day walking.
That's a lot in a city.
It was a lot, because in a city you're going off curbs and you're having to stop for traffic and stuff. But I really felt like I experienced Madrid more from walking places, and it felt safe. So I really enjoyed the walkability of it.
Yeah. Barcelona is largely walkable, but if you want to move between key areas, then the public transit's good. So if I go back to my road trip, as I say, it was a while ago now. We went to Valencia, which I've been to since. I was really racking my brain for what to say about Valencia. It's really nice. It's kind of like a smaller Barcelona to me, just without the really famous sites. Big beach, really nice. I don't have much to add. It's nice enough. If you happen to find yourself there, you'll have a perfectly nice few days. But I wouldn't say to anyone, before you die, you've got to go to Valencia. The one place that I found really interesting on that east coast is the Costa del Sol, which is actually very popular with Brits. In fact, I would join the anti-protest movement in the Costa del Sol. Benidorm, Alicante, it's England, and it's awful. I remember we pulled up in Benidorm and walked around, and to quote the Bad Religion song, Los Angeles is burning, how could hell be any worse? It is awful.
It's funny you mentioned Bad Religion, because there was actually posters of Bad Religion because they were playing a concert in Madrid like right after I left. So that's funny because I remember walking by and being like, oh wow, Bad Religion is playing, and I've seen them in college. I actually saw them when I was in high school for the first time. So yeah, it's kind of a side thing.
Well, yeah, I love Bad Religion. I was just reminded of their song. Yeah, Los Angeles is burning. One of the big lines is "How could hell be any worse?" And yeah, that was really Benidorm for me, and Alicante. I mean, beautiful scenery, and there are some nice towns nestled down that Costa del Sol, but the bigger towns are just heinous. It's huge apartment buildings. The beach is nice, but they're so crowded, and all you hear is English. You're walking down the street, and it'll say €2 for a Guinness, €5 for a full English breakfast. It's awful. So
I do like Guinness and full English breakfast.
I like Guinness and full English breakfast, and if I was walking through a cool place and suddenly found one, I'd probably go for a fry up. But when the whole town has basically been given over to serving English tourists, and there's no concession made to the fact that you're in a different country, apart from the fact that it's sunny, I really didn't like it. So yeah, I said if you find yourself in Valencia, you'll have a nice time. If you find yourself in Benidorm or Alicante, you probably won't. It's bloody awful. But if you go to one of the smaller towns around there, or if you drive inland from the Costa del Sol for an hour or so, great. Spanish villages, rolling hills with big limestone cliffs everywhere. It was amazing. But yeah, don't go to the big towns.
Now, have you done any of the Spanish islands?
Mallorca. Yeah. So that was next on my list.
Well, that's a good transition.
On my road trip, we didn't actually go to Mallorca. I went separately a few years ago. I was a little disappointed by Mallorca. You just heard so much about it. It's a cycling mecca. It's a rock climbing mecca. Loads of well-off people have houses there. I expected it to be nicer. It was great. It was beaches, cliffs, blue sea, nice towns, but it was. I expected it to be a little more upper crust. I thought a lot of Mallorca was kind of a bit run down, a bit dirty and tired looking. So I enjoyed it. I liked it, but I was expecting it to be a really plush, posh place, and I think there are parts of it that are like that, but it wasn't at all what I expected.
What's your favorite island in the Mediterranean?
Malta.
So if you were going to recommend somebody to go to an island
Yeah, we'll do an episode on Malta one time. I lived on the smaller of the Maltese islands, which is called Gozo, for 3 months. And Malta has a fascinating history. Malta's amazing, but...
Yeah, I remember I was going to come visit you there, and I can't remember if I had a ticket booked or I was just looking at booking tickets, but it was during COVID and it got all screwed up.
I think we were talking about meeting there and then going to Israel for a few days, but...
Or something, but everything kept getting shut down.
It was summer 21, and COVID hadn't quite disappeared, and it was just, it ended up not quite working out. But Malta's great, but never been to Ibiza. Again, I mean, famous for its party scene. I'm not sure what the rest of Ibiza's like, but yeah, I feel like I'm giving Mallorca a hard time. It was nice. It was a nice island, but I expected it was going to be the nicest island I'd ever been to, and it wasn't quite that. So moving south again, we ended up in Andalusia, which you've been to, because Malaga. God, maybe my geography's out, but I'm pretty sure Malaga is in Andalusia. It's basically on the south coast, close to Gibraltar, and that was great. So Andalusia is home to Granada, famous old walled city. It's also got the highest mountain in mainland Spain, so it's actually got ski resorts, believe it or not, in the south of Spain.
Wow, that's
near
really
Granada. But it is seriously hot. Again, I work in Celsius, so people in America may have to do some Googling, but it can certainly get into the mid-40s in the height of summer with some humidity, and that is just a savage level of heat and humidity. That's like being in Delhi in summer. So it's very, very hot, but stunning countryside, really desolate countryside, I would say, kind of barren countryside, desert, Arizona-like countryside, but huge, beautiful rock formations, and a place I got to know quite well is a tiny village called El Chorro, and the only reason El Chorro is famous really is partly for its rock climbing, but also it's home to the Camino del Rey, the walkway of the king, and that's basically a series of platforms and ladders which lead you through this huge 1,500 feet high canyon. So on either side of you are these huge 1,500 feet walls, and there's a walkway halfway up the cliff that kind of traverses through it, and you can walk through it. So Andalusia gets a big thumbs up from me. And then the final place I would recommend in Spain is Seville, or Sevilla, I believe, as the locals would pronounce it. Great town, really good food, has a real spacious feel to it, which not all European cities do. It's a big river that runs through the middle of it. There's a couple of huge squares. I really enjoyed Seville. And I think also it's a big soccer city, so if you're a sports fan, there's a couple of big teams in Seville, and you're great. But again, it was hot. We were there in December, and in the middle of the day, it was t-shirt and shorts weather, so I melt at thinking about what it would be like in the summer.
Yeah, I know you don't like the heat.
I actually love the heat when it's not humid.
Okay.
But Seville and kind of all that south coast gets super humid. But a great town.
Yeah, I really learned. We've talked about before that every trip you go on, you learn some valuable lessons about traveling. And the valuable lesson I learned when I went to Malaga is that not to try to do too much. Because I went there, but I don't really feel like I saw anything. I really don't remember anything about it other than my day trips out of it. And I just feel like that was such a shame and a wasted opportunity to see the area. I went in the winter, so it's a beach area, but it was cold, so there wasn't really any beach stuff going on. But I really learned from that trip that when I travel, not to try to do a million things where I don't really ever grow roots anywhere. And I feel like sometimes, especially if you don't get to travel a lot or you're going so far, people will be like, well, I'm going to go to Spain, so I'm going to do 2 days in Barcelona, I'm going to do 2 days in Madrid, I'm going to do 2 days here, I'm going to do 2 days here, I'm going to do 1 day here. And you really never feel like you see anything because you're spending your entire time just traveling around. So now, like when I went to Madrid, I said, I'm going to go to Madrid and I'm not going to do anything else. I could have gone to Barcelona for a couple days, but I really wanted to see one area. And I just feel like at least for me, that's a better, more relaxing and more interesting way to travel. And I learned that from Spain.
And I think that will crop up a lot on this podcast, that it's not about ticking off as many things as you can. You are much better staying in one place. And I've just listed some of the places I've been to in Spain. Basically, the whole drive I did, we took 3 months over that.
Yeah.
And I mentioned El Chorro, which is a village of 200 people. We were there for 6 weeks. So you get a feel for a place. So I 100% agree. I think it's much better to try and do one place really well than tick stuff off. But and that's something you'll keep here cropping up. Take your time, pick a place and go. Just don't pick Alicante or Benidorm, but pick a place and just go for a week would be my advice.
I've always said it's better to do a short trip than no trip. But whatever length trip you can do for whatever either the means or what's going on in your life, I do think that for however long you're at a place, just try not to do everything imaginable where you don't actually get to relax and take in, it's like the old saying, you stop and smell the flowers.
Yeah.
And I think that's important.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't want to say it was lucky because you make your choices, but at times in my life I've had the ability to work for a long time and then the ability to be off for a long time. And I appreciate that that's not a lifestyle that everybody has. when we did that 3-month trip in Spain, our budget was so hilariously small. We had a €40 per week food budget.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
I think I spent €40 a day on cava.
Yeah. See, so when I talk about being there for 3 months, please don't picture that I was going to the cash machine every month and taking out 10 grand that someone else had given me. We were living on the tightest budget, but it was great. I mean,
Yeah.
I was 20.
Well, you were young.
I was 24. Who cares?
Now there's no way you could go do that for 3 months. It'd be very difficult for you.
I wouldn't want to, let alone logistically. I don't want to travel in that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the basic premise is, if you're going to go somewhere, do that place as well as you can. And if you're lucky enough that you're 24 and you can live on $50 a week.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, exactly. We were crashing in the woods at one stage, and when I say sleeping rough, I don't mean on street corners, but we were sleeping in orchards and just pulling up and walking 50 meters into the forest and sleeping for the night, and it was kind of a different phase of life. So if you can't go for more than a week or more than a few days, then you should still go, but don't spread yourself too thin is the key.
Yes, I agree.
I forgot all about a final place in Spain, which is the Canary Islands.
Oh, yes, and I've actually almost booked trips there a few times. It's really not super expensive to fly to from the US to the Canary Islands, but the Canary Islands, they've been having a lot of anti-tourist stuff too.
Well, they really have been taken over by tourists. Yeah. I mean, particularly Tenerife, but all of them have been pretty hammered by tourism. A few years ago, I actually went to Lanzarote, which is known as one of the real touristy ones. And in the touristy bits, it was just England. But I have to say, in the north of the island, it was real Spain, real people, a real contrast. But the Canaries are beautiful, right in the middle of the Atlantic. The highest mountain in Spain is on Tenerife, believe it or not. It's got a huge old volcano called Mount Tidy.
Can you go skiing?
I don't believe you can. But a lot of people go cycling there. A lot of professional cycling teams go and train there because you can basically go from sea level to 4,000 meters, which is horrific, but ideal if you're a cyclist. So the Canary Islands, I would say, again, are probably in that category where if you find yourself there, you'll like it, but especially coming from North America, may not be the most interesting place you could go in Spain. Very touristy where they're touristy, and you really have to kind of seek out the non-touristy bits. But stunning, geographically, scenically, beautiful. But you could also head to one of the smaller ones, and it's a little more real. But yeah, sadly, they've been somewhat taken over by Brits and Germans.
Yeah, I would really like to go. I'd like to check it out and see what it's like.
Yeah, it's worth a trip, but you'll have to work hard to escape the Brits and the Germans shotgunning sunbeds next to swimming pools.
Can I have a full English breakfast?
You will not struggle to find a full English breakfast. You won't struggle to find a pint of Guinness.
Okay. But that sounds good. That's my favorite breakfast ever in the world, a full English breakfast.
What's your take on black pudding?
I like black pudding, and I even like haggis with my English breakfast. Yeah.
Oh.
You don't like it?
Oh. If you Google what the ingredients of a haggis are and tell me you could enjoy eating that. You have to switch any food where you have to switch your brain off. I'm not into.
You Google what's in a hot dog.
No one knows,
and they're awesome.
It'll say Google return no search results.
Yeah, you just don't want to watch it being made. That doesn't mean it doesn't taste good.
Like babies and hot dogs. Don't watch them being made.
Well, it depends who's making it.
You know what? Feels like that might be time to sign off. I feel like this conversation's got to go offline now. Hey, thanks so much. Fun to talk all things Spain. I think the bottom line is interesting country, loads to see, culturally different, but try and stay away from the tourist areas. Was that a good summary?
I think it's a good summary.
Speak to you next week.
Okay, see you soon. Bye.